The day they locked me out of the house, I stood on the porch with nothing but a worn duffel bag and a heart that had just buried its last protector. My father had been dead for less than 48 hours. I hadn't even had time to process the funeral, hadn't had a moment to sit with the silence he left behind. And yet there I was, frozen in the middle of the driveway, the sun setting behind me like a cruel joke as the people I once called family shut the door in my face. There was no argument, no second chances. Just a quiet shove out of the life I had always known. A house that once smelled of cinnamon and old jazz records was no longer mine. It belonged to them now, my stepmother and her children. The ones who'd barely tolerated me when my father was alive. The ones who wasted no time making it clear I no longer belonged. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I was too stunned. I stood there watching the lights inside flicker on like it was just another evening. Like nothing had changed. Like my presence had never mattered. The air was thick with the scent of fresh betrayal. My father's voice still echoed in my memory, warm and protective, telling me I'd always have a place to come home to. But now he was gone, and with him, every promise he made had vanished like smoke. There was no will. No protection. Nothing legally tying me to what should have been mine. And so they took it all. The house, the car, the savings, the silence. My father's family, his so-called relatives, stayed quiet. The same ones who held my hand at the funeral, whispered empty words about staying strong, now turned their backs. They didn't call. They didn't answer when I reached out. Their silence cut deeper than the betrayal. My mother had died when I was 10. Cancer. Quick and cruel. After that, it had just been me and Dad. We were tight. We had this unspoken rhythm, this bond that felt unbreakable. Until he remarried. And suddenly, I wasn't the center of his world anymore. I was the inconvenience. The reminder of a life he'd left behind. My stepmother barely looked at me unless it was to correct me. Her children never spoke to me unless they needed something. But through it all, I had my father. And as long as he was breathing, I felt safe. His death took more than just a parent. Took my place in the world. I wandered for days, couch surfing at friends' places until the invitations dried up. I slept in my car once, parked behind a gas station in the cold of November, wrapped in a coat too thin for the wind slicing through the night. I worked shifts at a local diner, scrubbing tables and refilling coffee cups, barely making enough to eat. The ache in my body was constant, but it was nothing compared to the ache in my spirit. There were moments I questioned everything. Why didn't my father prepare better? Why didn't he protect me from the people he trusted? Why didn't any of his family see me as one of their own? But questioning didn't fill your belly. It didn't pay for rent. So I kept going. I took on side jobs. Babysitting, running errands, walking dogs, anything that paid. I cut coupons like my life depended on it. Some nights, dinner was instant noodles and tap water. Some weeks, rent was a gamble between prayer and luck. But I never stopped moving. Because I knew, deep down, I wasn't meant to stay in that pit. I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to let this be my ending. There's something about pain that either breaks you or builds you. And every betrayal, every slammed door, every ignored phone call became a brick. Not to bury me, but to build something stronger. Something bigger. I made a promise to myself the night I slept in the back of a stranger's borrowed room with nothing but a hoodie for a blanket. One day they'll see me again. Not broken. Not begging. But powerful. Unapologetic. Unreachable. And that day would come sooner than they ever expected. Losing my father was the first blow, but what came after felt like a death of its own kind. After they forced me out, I remember sitting on the front porch with nothing but 2 duffel bags. One filled with clothes, the other with memories I wasn't ready to carry. I waited there for hours. For a relative, a neighbor, someone to ask what was going on. But they all turned their eyes away, pretending not to see. I called my Uncle Ray, the man who used to sneak me candy at church, who told me stories of how close he was to my father growing up. I thought surely he'd open his doors to me. "Sweetheart," he said, sounding distant. "I wish I could, but things are tight right now." I could almost hear his wife whispering in the background. I knew what tight meant. It meant he didn't want to choose sides. He didn't want trouble with my stepmother's kids, especially now that they controlled everything my father left behind. One by one, Every name in my contacts list became another closed door. And so, I ended up at a shelter. The first night, I cried so hard I gave myself a migraine. It wasn't just the cold mattress or the echoes of strangers' sobs. It was the shame. The disbelief that this was my life now. I worked odd jobs. Cleaning, waitressing, doing deliveries. Every dollar I made went toward food, transport, and saving for something, anything, that could change my situation. But no matter how tired I got, I refused to let bitterness take root in my heart. In the quiet moments when I'd sit on a park bench between shifts and watch the sun dip behind buildings, I'd talk to my mom in my mind. Mama, I wish you were here. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this. But something in me, maybe her spirit, whispered back, you already are. Eventually, I found a government program that offered scholarships to displaced and homeless youth. I applied with trembling fingers and a prayer in my throat. When I got accepted into a local community college, I cried like someone handed me the keys to the world. It wasn't easy. I worked nights while attending classes in the day. I lived in a shared apartment with 3 other girls who had their own hard stories. We bonded over shared meals and borrowed textbooks, over silent understanding and late-night tears. Slowly, piece by piece, I rebuilt. I majored in business administration with a focus on nonprofit management. Because I knew, if I ever made it out of this hole, I'd turn around and build a ladder for someone else. And then life threw me a rope I hadn't expected. During my final year, one of my professors recommended me for a paid internship with a foundation that supported women entrepreneurs. It was my first step into real opportunity and I ran with it. I poured everything I had into that role. My heart, my grit, my fire. By the time I was 26, I'd launched my own small business consulting firm. By 28, I had contracts with 2 Fortune 500 companies. And by 30, I had my own home. Not just a house. A sanctuary. The kind of place where the walls hold peace and the floors echo laughter. I had finally found the version of myself my father would have been proud of. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. But life wasn't finished turning. Because one day years later I got a knock on my office door. And when I opened it, the past came rushing back, in the form of my stepsister's youngest daughter. Her eyes were red, her hands shaking. Auntie, she whispered. I didn't know who else to come to. And just like that, the universe reminded me, even those who bury you might one day need your light. Seeing her, my niece, the daughter of the very woman who once spat in my face and called me nothing, standing in front of my office door was a full-circle moment I wasn't prepared for. She looked so much like her mother at that age, but there was something different in her eyes. They weren't cold. They weren't calculating. They were broken. She was trembling when I led her inside. I offered her water, but she couldn't even hold the glass steady. So I sat beside her just like my mother used to do with me and I waited. And when she finally spoke, it wasn't arrogance or entitlement that came out. It was fear. My mom, she's sick. Real sick. And the business went under. We lost the house, the cars. Everything. I didn't know where else to go. Mama said you'd never help us. But I had to try. I sat there, her words echoing in my chest. She said you'd never help us. Of course she did. Because she knew what she'd done. She remembered the lies she told, the will she tampered with, the night she screamed at me to get out and never come back. And now here her daughter was, hungry, scared, and asking for mercy. The pain of my past tried to rise up and take over. It reminded me of the shelter floors, the job rejections, the nights I cried into secondhand pillows. But then I looked at that girl and I didn't see my stepsister. I saw me. I saw the young girl who begged for help and was met with locked doors. I saw a child born into chaos she didn't choose. I took a deep breath. Where are you staying? She shook her head. I sleep at a friend's sometimes. Other nights I'm in my car. That was all I needed to hear. I found her a place to stay that same day. A women's housing facility run by a nonprofit I donated to. I made a few calls, got her enrolled in GED classes, helped her set up a job interview. Within weeks, she had a part-time position at my office. Not because of her last name, but because of her willingness to work and learn. And word must have gotten out. Because not long after, her mother came. I recognized the knock before I even opened the door. And when I did, I saw the ghost of the woman who once took everything from me. But life had humbled her. Her clothes were worn. Her skin was pale. Her pride gone. Please, she said, not even able to meet my eyes. I need help. I didn't move. Didn't speak. How do you respond to someone who once called you worthless? Who smiled while signing the papers that kicked you to the curb? Who watched you fall and enjoyed it? She lowered herself to the chair across from me, her voice thin. I made mistakes. I was angry after your father died. I was scared and greedy. And I let it turn me into someone ugly. I listened, but my heart stayed guarded. I can't undo the past, she continued, but I'm sick and I have nowhere to go. I didn't come here expecting a miracle. I just needed to say sorry. I know you probably hate me. Hate her? No. I did hate her once. But hate is heavy and I had already carried too much. So I leaned back, exhaled deeply and said, I don't hate you. I don't need revenge. You taught me something no school ever could. You taught me how to survive. Her eyes welled up. She opened her mouth, maybe to thank me, maybe to plead further, but I held up a hand. I'll help. Not because you deserve it, but because I know what it feels like to be left with nothing. And I refuse to become you. Helping her didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean inviting her back into my heart or life. It meant I was choosing me, choosing peace over poison. Because sometimes the greatest revenge is rising so high that those who tried to bury you have to look up to find you. After that day, everything inside me changed. I had forgiven her, not for her sake but for mine. Because I realized that the anger I had carried for years was only weighing me down. And now that I had let it go, I felt free, powerful, whole. But I wasn't done. Forgiveness didn't mean I forgot. And it definitely didn't mean I'd allow anyone to write me out of my own story again. I threw myself deeper into my business. I expanded. I hired more staff. I began mentoring young women from broken homes, girls like I once was, who were told they'd never amount to anything. I created a scholarship fund in my father's name. The very name they tried to erase from my life was now engraved on plaques, awards, and national headlines. I became a voice in my community, a guest speaker, an advocate, a powerhouse. And slowly something strange started to happen. People who once looked through me now reached out to me. Old family friends, distant relatives, even people who sat in the same room when my stepmother pushed me out and said nothing. Suddenly they remembered me. Suddenly they were so proud of who I had become. But I didn't need their applause. Their silence back then told me everything I needed to know. And then came the invitation that truly tested me. A family reunion. Organized by my stepsister, of course. I was shocked she had the nerve to send me an invite. But part of me knew why. He had heard. Everyone had. About the woman I had become. About the awards. About the magazine features. About the success I had earned with nothing but grit, grace, and God. So I went. Not for revenge, but to reclaim every inch of the space they once told me I didn't belong in. When I walked in, heads turned. Conversations paused. Eyes widened. I didn't wear designer clothes to impress them. I wore power. I wore dignity. I wore the pain they gave me like armor, and I held my head so high it could have touched heaven. My stepsister came up to me, awkward smile on her face, holding a wine glass like a prop. You look amazing, she said. We've all been watching you. You've done well for yourself. For yourself. Like I had done this alone. Like she hadn't stood by when they took my father's house, my father's name, my dreams. But I didn't flinch. I smiled. Thank you. It wasn't easy. She nodded slowly, her eyes scanning me up and down. I guess you proved us all wrong, huh? I looked her dead in the eyes and said, I didn't do it to prove you wrong. I did it because I knew I was never what you called me. I always knew who I was. You were just too small to see it. That was the end of our conversation. I didn't need her to clap for me. I wasn't there to be applauded. I was there to walk in the space they tried to erase me from, and own it. As I left that reunion, I felt something settle inside me. A kind of peace that doesn't come from vengeance or validation, but from knowing that I had survived what was meant to break me and turned it into a life that couldn't be ignored. I wasn't the scared girl anymore. I wasn't the forgotten daughter. I wasn't the one who begged for crumbs. I was a woman who rebuilt her table, and now they were asking for a seat at it. Years passed. The bitterness of what happened no longer stung, but the memory never faded. Sometimes I'd drive past my old neighborhood, not out of nostalgia but as a quiet reminder of just how far I'd come. I no longer felt pain when I saw the street sign or the rusty gates of that house that was once mine, but never really home. I had built something far more valuable than brick and wood. I had built myself. The girl they left to rot on the streets after her father died had become a woman who could now change lives with a single decision, a single donation, a single word. And that power wasn't just in money, it was in knowing who I was finally. One day I got a letter. It was handwritten, shaky. From my father's older cousin, Uncle Ray. The very man who promised to take me in after my dad died but vanished when I needed him most. He wrote, "I don't expect forgiveness, but I need to tell you I was wrong. I should have stood by you. We all should have. I've watched from afar and I am in awe of what you've done. You remind me of your mother, fierce and faithful. Your father would be proud." I stared at the words for a long time. A part of me wanted to rip the letter up. But the woman I had become didn't need to. I folded it, placed it in a box labeled closure, and tucked it away. Forgiveness didn't mean I needed to invite everyone back into my life. Some people were lessons. Some were scars. But none of them had power over me anymore. Later that year, I was invited to speak at a National Women's Leadership Summit. As I stood on stage in front of hundreds of powerful women, all listening to my story, I realized something. The real revenge was this: thriving in a world that was designed to break me. The reward wasn't making them feel bad for what they did. It was waking up every day knowing I had turned their cruelty into fuel, their betrayal into a platform, their abandonment into a legacy. And as I stood under those bright lights, I looked out at the crowd and saw her. A young girl, sitting alone. Her eyes locked on mine like she needed this moment to believe in something bigger. I smiled and spoke directly to her. They may leave you with nothing. But if you hold on to who you are, that's everything. That girl reminded me of the girl I once was. And I realized, I hadn't just come full circle. I had created a new one for someone else to step into. That was the kind of redemption I never saw coming. Not in applause. Not in payback. But in purpose. They say time heals. But I learned that healing isn't about time. It's about choice. I had to choose not to become what they said I was. Not to stay where they left me. Not to be small just because they tried to shrink me. I made peace with the fact that the people I once called family chose greed over blood. I accepted that the ones who were supposed to protect me watched me crumble and walked away. But I also chose to rise. To become the woman no one expected. The woman they whispered about at family gatherings, not out of pity but out of awe. I bought a home not just to live in but to reclaim the feeling I was denied, belonging. I started a foundation for abandoned girls, mentoring those who had nowhere to turn just like I once did. Every time I looked into their eyes, I saw my reflection. And every time one of them succeeded, I felt like I was rewriting my own past. And then one day I got an invite to a family reunion. It was from one of my stepbrothers, Jason. The same one who laughed the loudest when they threw me out. He wrote, "You turned out better than any of us. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I didn't go. Not out of bitterness, but because I no longer needed their acceptance. That broken girl who once begged for a place at their table? She now owned her own building with her own boardroom. I didn't need to be part of their story anymore. As I had written mine, in gold. And to anyone listening who's ever been betrayed, abandoned, or broken beyond recognition, let this be your sign. You are not what they did to you. You are who you choose to become. So choose power. Choose growth. Choose you. Because sometimes the best revenge is simply surviving beautifully. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of your own strength, please leave a comment. Let someone else know they're not alone. Like this video if it resonated. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more emotional stories. New uploads every single day. You're not alone. You're just getting started.